The final keynote for today, Quality in the Digital Age. Please welcome Mr. John Forte, Principal of Capgemini, Denmark.
Thank you. It's a tough one, isn't it? I think it's what a famous guy once said, there are three difficult things in life. Finding a rock that is leaning against you, kissing a girl that is leaning away from you, and standing between the crowd and dinner, which is what I'm doing today. So I really appreciate you sticking to the bitter end. This is actually my 5th time in Malaysia. So I'm one of the veterans here. Always a pleasure coming back. I try to combine it once in a while, bringing my family with me, and when we go on trips around in Malaysia. So, 3 years back, I went up the East Coast. So we did Cameron Highlands, Penang, Georgetown, and up to Langkawi. Back last year, we did Taman Negara. We did also Wedang, Perhentian Islands. And we also did Sarawak, where we did the Batangai, the Damai Beach. So I reckon that, if, as mentioned, thanks. If, as mentioned by Tarek, that, the whole IT industry is going to be replaced by robots, then probably I'm going to get applied for work as a tourist guide here in Malaysia. Unless that's going to be replaced by bots. But anyway, by the way, I did pass the ultimate Malaysian test. You know what this is? Exactly. I tasted the durian. First I thought it was some kind of a legal thing because I saw in the hotel there was no weapons, no durian. And I thought maybe I'm doing something criminal, yeah? But apparently it was a fruit, and I passed the test and tasted it. I would not reveal whether I liked it or not. That's a different story. All right. Just a couple of thoughts on the topic of the theme of this conference, testing as a service. I want to take a step back before getting into the digital age and testing in that, and let's look at testing as a whole. Now, this is my simplified testing process. Yeah, you might have a more sophisticated process that you're following. This is my simple test process. Yeah, very easy. One box. What we have in is application on the test in version X01 coming into that box. Okay? What we do is we invest a lot of time, money, tools, and effort. Now, what do you think comes out of the other end? Application on the test in version X01, which is exactly the same that came in. Now, if you take a step back, this is rather a poor process, isn't it? Imagine that you have a production line, you put something in one end, and look at the other end, and you have the same thing coming out, yeah? So I must be getting something else out of this process. Any idea? Any thoughts? Shout it, bugs, okay. So you're saying you're getting out of bugs. Okay, let's say just for the sake of this discussion that I completed the test, I didn't find any bug. So what I'm getting out of this process? Sorry? Reports? Let's say that I didn't document anything. Information, thank you. The main thing that is coming out of this process is information. Now, we as testers are all service providers. Whether you're conscious about it or not, we're providing a service to an organization, which is providing information. Now, think about your information sources like newspapers, magazines. Now, the ones you would like to subscribe to are the ones that are providing timely, relevant, and interesting information for you. Now, think of it take the same approach to its testing. If you want to become relevant, if you want to provide a good service, you need to focus on the quality of the information that you're bringing. Now, if the quality of the information they're bringing is high, people want to subscribe to that service. This is irrespective of whether you're getting it from independent, you're outsourcing it, or whether you're getting it internally by your own testing organization. Now, I'll get back to that point later on, okay? This is just a cliffhanger that I'm creating now. Now, obviously, we all know that the pace of information, the pace of change that we experience is totally unprecedented. Each day we have new technologies coming in. We are in the midst of the so-called the fourth generation of technology shift coming in, which we are experiencing right now. New apps, new business models. It's radically changed the way we interact with each other, the way we do business with each other. Gartner each year, they publish the so-called hype curve, where basically they try to plot in a lot of innovations into that hype curve. And you see a lot of, this is the one that they published July 2016. I expect something similar to be published quite soon. And then what they try to do is basically put that in, is it an innovation trigger? Is it the peak of inflated expectation? Is it going through the disillusionment, or is it the slope of alignment, or is it getting to the plateau of productivity? Now, what's interesting, I tried to compare that hype curve with previous hype curves, and what we find quite interesting is that a lot of new stuff there wasn't a part of the previous hype curve. So basically, we're even creating, the pace of change is happening faster than they can follow with the hype curve, which is quite interesting. Sometimes like, think myself, where will you put a hype curve on that hype curve? Maybe it will be somewhere here, yeah? But my point is, this change has happened very fast. A lot of analysts will call this disruption. There's new technology coming in, changing radically the way that we either interact, do business, communicate, socialize with each other. The four elements, the core building blocks of disruption are the so-called SMAC stack. SMAC standing for social, mobile, advanced analytics, and cloud. Basically, analytics, our ability to process large quantities of data. Now just think about it. Imagine how much change the way, for example, you work today. I live in Copenhagen, and I remember on my way out of the airport, there was this big sign saying, leave the country, but don't leave the office. So basically with, mobile, cloud, analytics, and social, making it possible you to work anywhere, anytime. Imagine the way that we interact with each other. I have my family with me. My daughter, she was 10 years old when she got her first mobile. I had to, basically, there was a lot of pressure on myself. I said, no, she shouldn't have a mobile, but at the end, I have to give up and give her the mobile. And she was calling me all the time, asking me for this and that, can you remember to buy milk, and can you, lend me a few ringgits or kronas later tonight, and these kind of things, yeah? She never called her mother, always myself, and I was quite proud. She always calls me, and And I remember we were sitting eating at dinner, and then my wife asked, "Why don't you call me once in a while?" And she just said, "That's because you work, Mom." Now, to my defense, my wife is a nurse. She works in intensive care, so she's literally saving lives each and every day. And in a child's mind, you cannot interrupt someone doing that critical work. I'm doing this. Yeah? So there's a big difference in the perception. Now, this SMAC tag is creating what we call the commoditization of IT. We're moving away from physical products to buying commodities, including the service behind it. And back to our discussion regarding testing as a service, we're also experiencing the commoditization of testing. You can basically nowadays, you can order a test service like you're ordering a pizza on the internet or a book at Amazon. This is an example. There's a known statement is that we tend to overestimate what can be done in 10 years and underestimate what will happen next 2. I think it was Bill Gates who said that. Now, this actually photo is taken from the exact application in 2 different years, 2005 and 2013. This is actually taken from so-called the papal election, which happens in Rome. Every time there's a need for a new pope, they'll have this election process, and you have the white smoke coming up once they have selected a pope. And that was the picture taken back in 2005. This is 8 years later. look at the technology adaptation shown in that same picture. Yeah? That's only 8 years. I've always found it quite interesting that people are, instead of experiencing something, are busy documenting that they're experiencing something. So instead of enjoying a concert, they typically stand up, filming the concert in order to see it afterwards, which is a bit strange. Yeah. But anyway, this is what is happening now. This technology is changing the way we interact. Yeah. Also, this technology is creating new business models. Now, this has also happened within the past 15 years. Yeah. This is what we see, the move from so-called bricks to clicks, yeah, where you see some of the technology leaders back then did not adapt to the technology shift in time enough in order to basically to get the full out of the smack stack. Yeah, for example, Nokia. Remember that? I'm a frequent traveler, and I remember about 15 years back when I used to land. You probably also experienced that yourself. Everyone would switch on their phone, and you hear the Nokia tone coming out. Now you never hear it. Yeah, it's Samsung, Google, and Apple. Blockbuster used to be the biggest video store on earth. Now everyone's having Netflix and the equivalent of that. HMV, it took, for example, iTunes, 2 years to become the biggest online store in the US, and 6 years to become the biggest in the world, just within 6 years. So the pace of change is happening sooner than we even can imagine. And this is also characterized by the magnitude of data, which seems to be exploding. Look at these numbers. Every 60 seconds, every 1 minute, you have about 98,000 tweets. You have 2.5 social network users. It was, they expected 2018. 11 million instant messages, and so forth. And the number keeps increasing. Now, at the same time, the volatility of the information is getting extremely high. You've probably seen this before. If you try to think back about the carvings in stone we have in like the ancient Greek temples and in Egypt, those things are still lasting today. The same pieces of information are still there to read. Books, you have books dating back to 16th century, 17th century that were printed at the time, and people can still read them. What about today? Say the blog lifespan is about 2 years. YouTube video is 20 days or so. This is the lifespan of it. While a tweet is just 18 minutes. Now, what does it mean for us as testers? It means that we're seeing a lot of pressure to change the way we approach testing. We need to think radically different. I think there was a point made, if we keep applying the same solutions to the same, or applying the same kind of thinking to the solutions that created the problems, we will never get a solution. We need to think differently. So what is happening? If you look at our systems, whether you're coming from a bank or insurance company, a medical company, you typically have a stack of different technology as part of your IT landscape. At the bottom, we have what we typically call system of records. This we have your databases, your SAP systems, your Oracle systems. These are characters of need to be very stable, have to have a high degree of resilience and stability. You want to make sure that these can maintain operation day in, day out. Yeah? At the top, you have the customer-facing application, your web systems, your interfaces to your iPhones, your tablets. These are characterized by having high degree of flexibility, agility, focus on customer needs, user experience. This is where companies try to create their competitive advantage to differentiate themselves from the other competition. Now, what is happening, of course, is that most of us testers, and I'm speaking for myself as well, are coming from this world, system of records. And our thinking the thinking we're applying and the methodology and the way you approach testing comes from this world. We used to, so to speak, the days where you had requirements defined well in advance, then you do the typical design and analysis, you create a test case, you run them, and then you release the system. And that could maybe the process can take a year, half a year, or so forth. Up here, we're talking about applications that are getting released within a matter of days, even hours, even minutes sometimes. So I think Gartner coined this the bi-model IT, where you have basically the solid IT at the bottom and the fluid IT on the top. I believe that in order for us to survive the next 5, 10 years, back to your question also, Hans, this morning about what's happening with us testers, I think we need to adapt some of the thinking that we have on top here in the system of innovation. And I think that will gradually become more and more. We probably in a few years, we'll have a thin layer of system of records underneath that. Now, what this also means is that here we have a clash. 2 different mindsets, 2 different approaches, 2 different methodologies. Testers coming from this will think very differently than testers coming from going up there. So this is back to the question. Obviously, question of how to make sure that the quality is intact. How do we make sure that, since we have different systems and different methodologies, how to make sure that the quality is intact in both worlds? This raises the question, of course, what is software quality? Test reader is still awake. What is software quality for you, ma'am? Bug-free system. All right, that's one view. Other views, what is quality for you? You, ma'am. Software quality, what is a quality for you? What does software quality constitute for you? Reliability. All right, excellent. Other views. Fits user needs. All these are good views. The point is, there are many views. Obviously, the one that is coming from the conventional system of record view is conformance to requirements. So let's say, for example, you have a chair that you're building according to requirements, then obviously you're meeting the quality criteria. Hoping, of course, assuming that you have described the criteria, the requirements in an adequate manner. Duran has defined, of course, quality as fitness for use. Deming actually once said, quality is the pride of workmanship, and I love this one. This is putting pride into what you're doing. Imagine a piece of antique furniture that you have, yeah? Obviously, it's handcrafted, so probably if you look at it, compare 2 chairs, they will not be too alike because there will be some deviations the way they've been manufactured. You can feel that people have put their passion, the love into making the creation of the chair. So it's a different kind of mindset that goes into that. Value for money, of course. At the end of the day, someone needs to pay the bill. And of course, quality is in the eye of the beholder. So whether you're coming from a system of innovation or a system of records, your perception of quality will be different. This is where we have a clash. It also means that basic quality is a multi-dimensional entity. So the only way you can meet the quality criteria is to measure on different dimensions. This is linking back to the keynote by Carol this morning. First attempt of standardizing quality was using ISO 9126. Basically, they said that quality constitutes of these major criteria: functionality, reliability, usability, efficiency, maintainability, and portability. That again can be broken down into other criteria such as, functionality can be broken down to suitability, accuracy, interoperability, and security, and so forth. This is now being replaced by another standard, as also mentioned by Carol. Now, if you try to look at those criteria, can you see a potential conflict between any of those quality characteristics? Anyone? You take efficiency. Does it contradict with something else? Maybe it contradicts with usability, yeah? In a sense, if you want to have a very usable system, then you need to have focus on making sure that customer can understand it and add the features that will help the customer, guide the customer through the process. However, if you want to have a code, you're going to say very efficient, and you're looking for very compact code where you don't have a lot of, it doesn't take a lot of time, processing time in order to execute. What about security? Security and usability. When a system tells you that either your password or username is wrong, or from a usability point of view, well, why doesn't it tell me which one is wrong? Is it my username or is it the password? But here, actually, you're making a trade-off between security and between usability. I can go on. So my point is, some of these quality characteristics will go hand in hand, while others will be contradiction. And the point is, you will need to agree on a consensus. So when you go into a project, start working on a new product, obviously we need to come to a conclusion about what makes quality for you. What are quality characteristics that will basically constitute your product? Going into the digital age, and basically this is where we're talking about the system of innovation, we'll see a new type of hybrid testing models coming up, which is a combination of the old traditional one that we have on the system of records together with the new that we have on the system of innovation. And it's all about striking a balance. What do I mean by that? Ultimately, at some point in time, you will need to face the question, are we ready to release the product? And how do you determine that? When are you ready? Anyone? I'll pick someone random. You, sir, when do you think your software is ready to ship? It's good enough. Okay, how do you define that? All right, other views? When do you think you're ready to ship? Major functionalities completed. So you have developed those functionalities, you're ready to ship. And tested. And? Meet the definition of done. All right, excellent. Point is, sometimes as testers, we would like to be perfect, yeah? We would like to pursue the quality irrespective of the cost. Now, I like to think about like a bit in a court of law, yeah? You have a prosecutor and you have a defender, and each will make their case. Now, as a project manager, you probably think that the software is innocent and they prove it guilty, yeah? While as a tester or a test manager, by definition, software is guilty, yeah, until proven innocent, yeah? And you present both your cases, and someone will make a decision to ship the software or not. I don't believe personally, and this irrespective of whether you're coming from a system of record or system of innovation, that you as testers need to make that decision. And we were talking in the beginning of my talk about your role as testers being a service provider, providing information. The best thing you can do is provide the data and information to the stakeholders. And if you're providing good information, they'll have a good solid basis for making a good decision. Now sometimes they will just ship the product, even though that you have bugs, issues, or features, or whatever you call them, still left in your application. Because there may be different consideration that needs to be taken into account. For example, you want to be first in the market. You have, you want to enter a new market. You want to beat competition and so forth. So in other words, if you look at that curve, this is basically taking some of the ideas by Duran, where you have the cost of finding and fixing going up, alongside with the quality level, and of course, cost of failure going down as long as you do testing. The optimal is at this stage. If you pass that point, this is where it becomes cheaper letting your customers finding the last bugs. In a traditional system of records, this is a bit like making popcorn. Have you tried make your own popcorn at home? You know how it is? You know popcorn? All right. What is the recipe for popcorn? What do you do? You put some corn butter into a pot, all right? Put it on the stove, put the heat on, some oil, some bit of salt, maybe, and you wait, yeah? What happens? First, nothing happens, yeah? You have to wait, be patient, you need to be patient and just wait, and then start popping, yeah? And what happens? No, then it starts popping, yeah? And then you hear that, you know, the popping rate start increasing, yes, tick, 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 tick. And then at some point, you take it off the stove. Now, the tricky part is when making popcorn, and I'm a very experienced guy making popcorn, is that if you wait too long, sometimes you will get greedy because you want a lot of popcorn, to pop. You end up having these burned black popcorn that don't taste that well, yeah? On the other hand, if you take it prematurely, you only have a few popcorns you have popped, then you miss out on a lot of popcorn, yeah? So the tricky part is finding that point. Now, software is a bit the same, coming from the system of record, yeah? That basically, you want to go with where the defect popping rate goes down below a certain threshold. And that metric has been used for ages when it comes to system of records. Now, good thing is you can still use that as an indicator if you're using, of course, system of records. If we're talking about system innovation, this method doesn't work. You still have to find the minimum, but the calculation of that is not only depending on the defect finding rate, but there are different criteria actually that can help you judge when you reach that point. And I'll get to that, how to determine that in a few minutes. You probably heard about the Maslow's pyramid of needs. But basically, Maslow tried to identify the pyramid of different needs that you have. And the concept behind it is that you don't go, for example, for self-actualization before having the basic needs in place. So you first will try to cover, different psychological factors such as, food, shelter, these kind of things, and then you move up the pyramid. And, once you're at the top, this is where you look at self-fulfillment. This is where you want to, climb Mount Kilimanjaro or the Everest. This is where we want to swim with the dolphins and these kind of things. And obviously, you don't think of those if you don't have the basic need covered. There's a slight variation of this where basically I've seen that Wi-Fi comes now at the bottom. And if you think about it from a testing point of view, again, talking about system innovation, the kind of change that is happening is that you have the first bottom, the first need that you need to cover is your ability to deploy. Why? Because if you're talking about an app that a customer needs to access, customer will need to get it from App Store or Google Play, or the location where we can access your latest version of your app. And if you don't have that in place, they will never discover how wonderful your application is. Once you go up the ladder, then you have this where you have the functionality. Now, coming from a system of records, many of us are functional testers. Now, what is happening is that the functional layer is decreasing. Give me an example. In Denmark, our most successful app is called Mobile Pay. Only thing it does is transfer money from one phone to another phone. That's the only thing it does. Now, if you think about it from a functionality point of view, there's very little functionality to test. I only need to test that I'm able to transfer some funds from this mobile to this mobile. That's the only thing. So functionality is, the layer of functionality is getting smaller. What is getting bigger is the one that comes on top of that, interoperability. Now your apps are connected to other apps, connected to social media, connected to a chain of other systems that might be outside of your control. For example, they might be built on your mobile. You want to test, for example, that you can still transfer your fund even though that your customer is playing Candy Crush or I don't know on his phone, that there's no kind of side effect of doing that simultaneously. And this is raising new requirements you might not have thought of before. For example, in the old days, no one will think of what happens if you take the screen and rotate it, yeah, because no one will do it, yeah. You're sitting in front of a stationery and rotating the screen seems silly, yeah. But nowadays, you need to test. This is a new requirement. I mean, what happens also if you're on your app going into an elevator where your connectivity pretty much drops. So this is creating a new set of requirements which needs to be there in order to support the functionality. With that in place, then of course you have a wide range of non-functional aspects. Security, performance being the most important. You have a lot of others like resilience, reliability. These are coming extremely important. And at the end, the usefulness. Ultimately, what you want is your end users to like your application so much that they'll give them a thumbs up and endorsement and recommend those to your neighbors, your friends, and so forth. And ultimately feedback to having more and more getting your apps from the App Store. Now, interestingly, if you look at usability, taking the definition goes back to 1998, it finds that effectiveness, efficient satisfaction of which a specified set of users can achieve a specified set of tasks in a particular environment. This is still correct in nowadays worlds in system innovation. By the way, there are a few variations of that. Maslow's testing needs that you can also find there. I recommend you to look up. So how can you test what is building on the SMAC stack? Best thing you can do is using the SMAC itself to test SMAC. What do I mean by that? There are tools out there that will enable you to listen to the customer, what the customer is saying. There are tools out there that will enable you to crunch the data, extract it from different sources, from social media, to let you know about what your customers are thinking about your functionality, about your apps. Now, if you're coming from a system of records world, traditional approach, for example, of collecting requirements, goes like this. You have, for example, typically sales or marketing or business owners who have basically connects to the outside world, who go out there and basically collect a set of requirements and define them, describe them, and then they pass them on to some architects who do the architecture and design, to the developers who do the coding, and then from the coders they will pass it on to the testers and so forth. And at the end, of course, you have the business owners doing the UAT to make sure that you have met the requirements that were there initially. What is happening there is that this is often similar to, you know the name Chinese Whispers, the game Chinese Whispers? This is basically, I think you probably played that in school, where I'll whisper something in this gentleman's ear and you do the same, and at the end you probably end up with something that is very different than what the original concept was, yeah? Now, in a system of records, this is what we used to do to a large extent. We used to whisper in each other's ears and the message gets diluted each time from one step to another. By listening to the customer now, we have a possibility of tapping directly from a source. We can use those advanced analytics directly from our customers and feed them into the requirements. We don't need this marketing guy going out and conducting survey surveys or guessing what the customer wants. You can actually ask them. We can use this to identify latent needs, even requirements that the customers have not expressed directly, because you can just listen and monitor behavior of customers, how they're using your application in the real world. You can detect areas that need focus for testing. If a lot of customers are complaining, for example, about certain areas where they find your apps problematic, where they find defects, you can use that as a trigger to improve your test strategy. You can use that as a part of your risk-based approach. Those of you who have been to my speech earlier today know that risk is about determining the impact and likelihood of failure. You can use social listening and advanced analytics to help you get more insight into where is the likelihood of things going wrong. Use that to optimize test coverage. And remember, you can also get early feedback on your apps in use immediately from the customers. All right. So where are we heading? If you look at it, there are 3 areas that I want to focus on. One is end user involvement. Another one is the domain aspect of it, which is the business-centric aspect of it. And the last one is non-functional aspect, which is basically I see that we as testers need to move into or expand into. Just to, in the interest of time, I will not cover all these aspects, but a couple of examples. You take hallway testing or A/B and multivariate testing. This is all about letting your customers doing some of the testing. Now, the new technology makes it possible for us to send certain features to certain geographies and see how it's being perceived by the customers, how it's going to be, how it's being used by the customers, and based on that, we can then adapt. We can change, either roll it back, for example, to the original state, or adapt it and roll it out to other countries as well. So A/B testing, for example, is an example where you split your user group into 2. And let's say this half of the audience will be seeing, when they go, for example, into LinkedIn, they'll be seeing one message coming up. The remaining of the group will be seeing a different message. And based on the conversion rate, where you see the highest level of acceptance by the customer, you decide whether you want to go with A or B. This is why it's called A/B testing. Multivariate is the same as a variation of that, where you have multiple options at the same time. Gamification. This is basically where you use the concept of games to let your customers do the testing for you. You've probably seen that sometimes there are some weird competitions where the answer is very easy, yeah? And everyone, what is the color of the sky? Ah, it's blue, I know the answer. And you start clicking. Basically, you're helping the vendor, software vendor, do some testing. Can be performance testing, can be certain testing. You're not aware of that, but basically they're passing some of the testing to you that you're doing for them. Other aspects, of the non-functional, I'll probably mention monkey testing. I've spoken on that topic multiple times. I think the first time I was invited here as a topic of monkey testing. Basically, this is randomly testing, exercising your application with random input and seeing the response. Now, that concept used to be used in the field of devices, hardware, in order to test the reliability and resilience. Basically, you just bombard the system and monitor how much time does it take for it to break down. Now, interestingly, this is also emerging now in the system of innovations. So, for example, Netflix, they have the concept of simian army. Have you heard about that? Look it up. It's basically an army of bots or monkeys that will randomly bring down certain parts of the infrastructure. And the idea is to see that the other parts of the system will recover gracefully and continue operations. And this is happening, believe it or not, in the production system. So this is constantly doing the testing by launching different armies of bots and robots doing the testing for you. The same thing, they also have the concept of security monkey or security gorilla and the performance gorilla and so forth. And of course, the whole concept of application intelligence and bots that Tarek covered this morning. So if we look at where we are as testers today, we're here in the center. We have a shift up, meaning looking more into the business perspective, end user perspective. We have a shift left in terms of moment of involvement, starting as early as possible in the software development lifecycle. We have a shift right, closer to the basic operations. This is where you have the continuous integration, continuous delivery kicking in. And you have to kick down. It's where you have closer interaction with your developers, making sure that you can work together with them, making sure that they can adapt the best practices in order basically to avoid defects from ever happening. I believe that in order for us to be relevant, we will have to start thinking about shifting into those areas. So, as mentioned before, I believe functional testing will start diminishing as we do it, as we know it, and unless we start moving into those areas, the chances are that our jobs are going to be replaced by the bots that Tariq mentioned before. All right, I'm going to skip a few here. It's all about looking at it from an end user perspective, as mentioned. So picking up skills that will get you closer to end users, either by getting domain skills or actually getting involved directly with your end users. For example, going on the traditional, so to speak, bug hunt with your end users, a part of the team. So this is basically the way I envision this changing from the old playbook to the new, or the system of records to the system of innovation. We're moving away from only finding defects, reporting defects, into identifying patterns, listening to the customer. We're moving away from activity-based to platform-based, from testers to user advocates, from hardware-bound environments to virtual environment. As I mentioned this morning during our panel session, you can nowadays expand your environment as much as you want on demand. And this is the power of, for example, the cloud, that, the whole, as mentioned, the part of the SMAC stack. We're moving away more from, getting away from confirming requirements into monitoring using behaviors. And you're no longer constrained by the local skills you have in the teams, because basically you can, using as a service model, acquire the skills that you need whenever you need them on demand. And last but not least, we are moving away from the functionality-focused approach towards a holistic quality approach. So to summarize, our terrain is changing, and I think in order for us to survive, we need to adapt. These are the words. Any comments or questions? Okay, Rex. Yes. Oops, here it is.
I guess I wasn't loud enough. Love it. Great idea. Cost of quality, great stuff. You ever seen anybody actually do that, though?
Both yes and no. I've seen some banks and some companies in the life sciences, medical devices area who do that. Maybe not present in a graph, but basically they would collect some data and present it to the stakeholders and have the stakeholders determine whether they have done enough testing or not. I think my point is not actually doing the calculation or presenting the graph, but rather the thought process behind it. In a sense that, as testers, we tend to be the crusaders of quality, so to speak, that we want to go, down the perfection road. And for us, we have, we would like to get the last bug in the system. But in reality, there are different pressures. There are market constraints. There are competitors out there that, from the business side, there's a different perspective. So perhaps for them, they can go with less quality. So my point is, of course, you want to have both views in order to determine that point. So that may be not necessarily something that can be computed using a spreadsheet or an exact model, but at least the thought process. If you have the objective of having these two views meeting and discussing, you can determine if you've reached that point or not. Ultimately, typically you know that after release, whether you have reached that point or not.
I would just think that you have differing opinions. My experience is that most stakeholders, other than testers, have an opinion that the quality is a hell of a lot higher than it actually is.
That's correct. I gave the analogy of being in a court of law where basically you have two cases being presented, and you're quite right. I mean, from a product owner point of view, from a project manager point of view, typically they think the quality is higher, while from testing it's always lower than it is actually. Sometimes I've even seen that sometimes testers will worry about bugs that no one will ever care about. So this is also the symptom of going down the perfection road. Other comments, questions? Thanks, Rex. All right then. It seems to be it's been a long day. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you once again to Mr. John Forday, and a great end to the first day today. And for the final session, we will have the prize presentation ceremony.